gentlemen of the interwebs. Exceptionally today, I'm just going to make sure that audio is working before we go live, because as you can tell, I'm on the road and in someone else's studio, and I've crossed a time zone into Central, and so I just want to make sure that we are good live, that you can hear me before we get into today's show. Going to look on vivabarneslaw.locals.com. I'm not sure that we're on a good mic, but we are good enough to go, people.
Most Americans are aware that there's a system, something like what you just described.
Right.
But the pretext for it, the justification for it is that there's a lot of Islamic terrorism. There are a couple intifadas. There are a lot of suicide bombings. And it's Islamic terror. And most Americans have been taught for 25 years that Islamic terror is a threat. And, there's some truth in that, of course. But so we assume that Christians would be getting an exemption from all this. Why would Christians who are not responsible for Christian terror, there's no such thing, why would they be penalized for this? Why wouldn't they, again, when the patron saint state is majority Christian, why wouldn't the Christians there be getting some kind of special pass? I just don't understand that. Why punish the Christians for Islamic terror?
Because I don't think it's Islamic terror that's taking place in the first place. I think we have to disabuse ourselves of that notion that this is a battle between Muslim and Jew, or that, constantly you heard after the October event was that Hamas. Even to this day, we hear it's Hamas,
Yes.
Hamas. What is Hamas? Hamas are people who have had their homes taken from them, who, if they live in Gaza, have not been basically been in an open air prison for certainly the last 20 years.
We'll pause it right here, people. I've said it now a number of times. This is the worst interview Tucker Carlson has ever done from a journalistic perspective, from an intellectual honesty perspective. The October event. I don't call people Hamas apologists reflexively. I watched this entire interview. At some point, I wanted to turn it off because it was just too much, but I watched it. This woman, and enough with the silly jokes. Apparently, it's George Stephanopoulos' sister. Apparently, this woman is George Stephanopoulos' sister, who left America back in the late 90s under a flurry of lawsuits, context unknown. And you wouldn't know that from the interview because Tucker Carlson didn't ask her a damn thing about her credentials, her upbringing, what drove her out of the country, if anything. This was an interview in which Tucker Carlson, promoted not a lie, but a misrepresentation, a material misrepresentation that somehow Israel is responsible for a decrease in Christian population in Israel that's actually not happening. But if you watch the interview, you'd know that it was actually referring to a decrease of the Christian population in the West Bank, Palestinian territory. The woman he had on, other than being the DNC cleanup guy, George Stephanopoulos, the thing is, I don't even know if it's his sister. There's very little on the internet on this person, and I don't mean a social media footprint of a nun. I mean an internet analysis of who this person is. It appears to be George Stephanopoulos' sister, who left America amid a flurry of lawsuits in the late 90s, moved to the West Bank, and has been a nun, though 98% of her students in the West Bank are Muslim students, is doing that. And when I say that this woman is a Hamas apologist, it is because she quite literally said Hamas are people who are is a group that's defending their people. I'm not going to belabor the point. This is not a question of defending Israel or the Israeli government. I have been probably among the more critical since October 8 because I don't refer to October 7 as an event, as if to downplay the fact that it was a massacre and an atrocity, which it was perpetrated by Hamas terrorists because Hamas are terrorists, period. That they're defending their homeland. Hamas brutalized the Palestinian people as much, if not more, than anybody else. Apologists to say that it was an event on October 7. Hamas are a people who have, somehow rationalizing the October event. And Tucker didn't do a damn thing to push back on this woman at any point during the interview and perpetuated this misconceived notion that somehow Israel's responsible for the decrease in the Christian population in the West Bank and not, say, Palestinians or Palestinian Authority. And there was a point in that interview where this nun literally said, Tucker's prodding her, why isn't the population growing of Christians in the West Bank? Because it's now down under 10,000 or something. And she says, well, it's very hard for anybody to convert to Christianity in the West Bank because they'll get murdered or they risk getting murdered. As a matter of fact, just as a pure matter of fact, the Christian population in the Middle East, I think, and I'm not an expert on this, but I think Iran might be the other exception where the population of Christians has grown and not shrunk. It's Israel, and that's it. The only country in the Middle East where the Christian population has grown. It has certainly shrinked in the West Bank and Palestinian territories. It's certainly shrunk in every other Muslim country in the Middle East. Indonesia is another country where Christianity is growing. It's a Muslim country, but not in the Middle East. There was another clip that I had from that interview, which I just couldn't believe what was going on. Here, this is it right here. I couldn't believe the absence, not of pushback, of clarification of the person that Tucker was interviewing. And why? Because Tucker, for whatever the reason, is hell-bent right now on criticizing Israel, and that's fair game. You're going to criticize Israel, however, criticize them for things that are actually being done, that they're actually doing, and not things that they're actually not doing.
It gets back to the thing, though, is that people don't always see the whole story. And we're just flooded with this message that those terrorists are coming to get us next, which is absurd.
Oh, it's absurd. Like Islamic terror in the West is absurd. The fact that zealots for the Palestinian cause have caused violence in the West is absurd. I mean, I love that Tucker at least concedes that Islamic terrorism in the West is a thing. Good for you, Tucker. That's journalistic honesty of the highest order.
Has any member of Hamas or anybody of a Palestinian come and threatened America as an American?
Threatened America as an American? What have they done? Is it threatened America as a Jew? Threatened America as a Zionist? Has any Palestinian threatened America? Yes. Have any Islamic terrorists, in the name of what they feel to be Israeli abuses of Palestinian rights, done anything to the West? Yes.
No, that's not what they're about. The thing is but that's the tactic that's used, is that we have to plaster them as being these jihadists when they're nothing like that.
Are they?
Listen to this.
I mean, I'm sure you've dealt with Hamas or know people
Sure.
who have, right? Are they religious fanatics? Are they jihadis?
Not the people that I know. Like I said, when I was again in at the school, we had a couple teachers, Muslim men, and there were some elections going on. And it wasn't Hamas then. It was the Social Party or something. But it was definitely a Muslim religious party. I would have voted for those guys because they weren't corrupt. They wanted to serve their people, and that's what it was about. So I'm not saying it doesn't happen anywhere. I'm not.
No, it's very honest. It's the utmost of intellectual honesty. Watching that interview, it occurred to me that Tucker didn't even ask the first question that should have occurred to him as to whether or not this woman can even possibly hope to speak freely about Hamas. Honestly, critically of Hamas, she's got to go back to the West Bank where, as she observed, Christians every now and again, Muslim converts to Christianity, risk being murdered. And the problem with this interview is that it wasn't just like a conversation among friends. Remember when Joe Rogan took heat for his interview with Jack Dorsey? And his explanation was, look, it was a conversation among friends. I wasn't going to sit there and grill the guy. This interview was not even softball questions, was Tucker Carlson almost feeding the person he was interviewing the points that he wanted to get out because he is critical of Israel right now. There was not even pushback, clarification, no broader follow-up questions to anything in this, no intellectual curiosity as to whether or not this woman is free to speak in criticism of Hamas. And it's the worst thing I've ever seen Tucker Carlson do. I was critical of his interview with Sinclair. What was this guy's name? Larry Sinclair? The crackhead who allegedly had fornication with Barack Obama. When he came out with that interview and he said, of course, it's a known fact that Larry Sinclair gave a BJ, I think, to Barack Obama. And then I watched that interview, and no meaningful prodding of this of the guy, and you have at the end of the day a drug addict recovering or whatever who claims to have had relations with Barack Obama. It's like, this is it's uncorroborated and untrustworthy, and B, it's, I would say, even almost unnewsworthy. This interview people are saying Viva Tucker's always been like this. He hasn't. Like when he was with Ted Cruz, he wasn't like this. He was pushing back. He was asking follow-up questions. To not even know who this woman was, to hear her spout factually incorrect statements throughout this interview, and then to downplay Hamas, downplay Islamic terrorism, and almost attempt to deify Hamas. The October event, terrible. I think this is going to cause severe reputational harm to Tucker. It's not going to end his career. When I say it's going to cause reputational harm, it's because now I, who have been a big Tucker Carlson defender, look at him wildly differently as a result of this horrible, horrible interview that was meandering. Things didn't make any sense. There was no context given to anecdotes. And then people say, Viva, it's just a woman sharing her anecdotes. Good. That doesn't mean you don't get context and details on anecdotes. That doesn't even mean if you're interviewing someone with whom you agree that you don't ask the questions that your adversaries would ask. Even when I'm asking questions of people who I agree with, I say, look, the critics would say X, Y, and Z. How would you respond to that? So I listened to that as I was driving because I had a lot of time to listen. We drove from Florida to, apparently there's no such thing as northern Tennessee, but I believe that I'm close enough to the border of Kentucky right now to say northern Tennessee. So I had a lot of time to listen, and I listened to that, and it was just atrocious. Yeah, I have been very critical of Israel government, of Netanyahu, of the October 7 terrorist attack, because it was a terrorist attack, period. My criticism is we still don't have a satisfactory explanation as to how it occurred at the scale it did. And you can either blame Netanyahu for, some would suggest, a lee-hop, me-hop, let it happen on purpose, made it happen on purpose. Others are going to say that's a terrible accusation. How can you dare say something like that? One thing is for certain. It was either the most catastrophic intelligence failure in Israel's history at best, because that's the only non-culpable explanation for it, or something much, much worse. And I interviewed someone from Israel, and he said, look, in Israel, the left blames the right. The left says Netanyahu let it happen on purpose so that he could lay claim to a war with Iran, lay claim to raising all of Gaza, to occupy that territory, using that as a pretext. People on the right accuse the left of having allowed it to happen, saying Mossad is anti-Netanyahu. The military was critical of Netanyahu for, trying to overhaul the judicial system so that basically they could have unchecked power, and that it was sabotage of Netanyahu so that people can then blame Netanyahu on the left. You've got your conspiracy theories on both sides. One thing that is abundantly clear, at the very least, it was an inexplicable, catastrophic intelligence failure of an intelligence that can place, what are those things called? Pagers. Explosive pagers in the pockets of terrorists that can go and assist with the most sophisticated attack on Iran. Bulldozers and paragliders for an attack that lasted 12 plus hours. And we have yet to get a satisfactory explanation for that. And I'm not sure that there is a satisfactory explanation for that. But one thing's for certain. It was a terrorist attack carried out by Hamas. Hamas is a terrorist organization. And there's no ifs, ands, ors, buts about that, whether or not you think Palestinians have legitimate grievances against Israel. I don't think many people would disagree with that either. To go from there to say Hamas are fighting for their people, Hamas are terrorizing their people. Hamas are using their people as human shields, whether or not you believe it, they are. That being said, Israel is certainly now, as a result of October 7, done exactly what people were saying they were going to do from the beginning, use it as a pretext to raise all of Gaza, either create a buffer zone or displace millions and millions of people, knowing they're going to have nowhere to go because the Arab countries do not take them. And the West, at least in Canada, is now possibly taking them with all of the risks and perils that that's going to take, because there's a reason why the neighboring Muslim countries have not taken in the Palestinian people and have effectively pushed them out when they were there in the first place. Israel deep state versus Israel deep state, same picture. But that interview was just horrendous. And whatever. People are saying Tucker's just lost his mind. It might have just been a one-off, but criticism is warranted. Criticism shall be issued. Criticism has been issued, and I believe I've at least substantiated it.